think carefully about what it means to center the user's voice and how that kind of maps onto simplistic ideas of racial politics, because it can definitely produce some unintended effects, to put it perhaps charitably. So yeah, that's what I have to say on that.
And Maha, for this question.
So I too had active listening and relationship building as my first points in my notes here. So that definitely those are very, very important things to think about. Also for institutions or libraries or associations working in this area, don't hide behind the usual things that generally institutions tend to hide behind. You know, don't say, oh, we don't have money to do that. We don't have people to do that. We don't have a policy on this. You need to move beyond that if you really are serious about EDI work. Okay, I have an example of the active listening piece. So we did a display of Gandhi's works at the Education Music Library last year in November for his 150th birthday. So I come from India. I have I've read a lot about Gandhi, but my perspective is from as an Indian who knows Gandhi rather than, say, a South African. So a South African student challenged and sent an email asking why we did this when we know Gandhi is a completely different person in South Africa. He's seen through a different lens. So I responded to her, thanking her for her message and also acknowledging, yes, I do know that he was a very complex person and he had multiple, not to use the word different personalities, but he was seen in different lights in different places he lived in. But also mentioned that we have the very different collection here, and that's what we were trying to host, to align with what the university was doing for the 150th anniversary of Gandhiji. So it's very important to talk to your patrons or your higher ups about why we are doing something. It doesn't have to be, okay, these are the good reasons, these are the right reasons, but we need to be able to enunciate why and how. And if we need to take it down, we need to take it down. We need to step back, we need to step back, that's it. But to make this center voices, I think we have to make EDI part and parcel of everything we do. Right now, even now, I think it's still an add-on, and add-ons will fall off at some point. I think it's Nadia Kaidi and Karen Daly who said diversity by design. It has to be part and parcel of everything we do. Otherwise, this is just an emotional outburst that we are doing because there's so much happening, the violence and Trumpism, of course. So all of this has made us think about EDI in a different perspective, and we'll lose that perspective if we don't make EDI part of everything we do. So 5 years from now, when there's new librarians coming on, they will start at the same place that we have started today and wonder, and it'll feel like, I think one of the questions that we've been asked was, why does it feel like every time we do this, it's something new? That's because we lose that momentum at some point. We let it fall and we go back to the norm that everybody is comfortable doing. And EDI always feels like, oh, this is new. Oh, this is new. It's like goldfish in a little pond, always turning around and saying, oh, this is something new. Oh, this is something new. It's not new. People have been doing this for a long time. So if we want to sustain it, like David mentioned, we have to make it from within. We have to make it pieces of everything that we do in the library. If you have the luxury of asking your library, what is missing that we could do, not just you as BIPOC, but all of us as librarians or library employees, what is missing in our library from an EDI perspective that we should do? Can we do that? So do that. And if you decide to ask your patrons what is missing, you do a quick survey, there will be an expectation that you're going to do something. So if you're not willing to commit, there's that bad word again, then don't ask your patrons what you want to do. So if you're going to ask them, you better do that. So exhibiting collections and doing some services alone is not enough, but everything that we do has to have that. So it could be in your hiring practices, it could be in your promotion practices, it could be in your standard. I think UCLA last year, there was a lot of feedback for them because they were kind of going into activism EDI because they were asking people, their new hires, to write a statement about their EDI, how they would do EDI at work, and that didn't receive a good rap. But we need people to commit to EDI. So then how do we go about it? We have to figure out a way to make EDI happen in every which way, but we haven't come to that point yet. We're still scratching the surface. We're still trying to lay the foundation. So there's a lot of work to do in this area.
Thank you, Maha. So I'm a little, I'm cognizant of time as it's almost 11:40, but I'd like to get through one more prepared question before we move to audience questions around 11:45. That might give, so I'll move to the next question, which is question 4.
David, can we actually talk about the 5th question, the harmful practices?
Sure, let's move to question 5 then. So question 5, in your experience, what do you consider to be the most harmful practices or structures that have persisted in libraries and academic institutions? How can early career library workers or LIS students combat this as we operate within the existing white supremacist and colonial structures of our institutions? Ashley, you are next.
Okay, so this is a really hard and personal question, and I thank you, Maha, for asking that we address it, particularly in this setting. So I think when I was thinking about this question and reflecting on how I wanted to answer, the word that kept coming up for me was exclusion and or exclusionary. And as I mentioned before, like I'm a white-coated Indigenous woman, and I was alternatively, growing up, I was alternatively asked what tribe I was from, which is not the language I would use today, but this was the language that was being presented to me at the time. Or I was being asked why I was so dark. So depending on who was speaking to me and what family members I was with. And so that experience kept coming back, and how I engage with my indigeneity in different contexts, and being told that it didn't count in high school, meaning that when I went to university, I didn't seek out an Indigenous Student Center. I didn't think about the fact that none of my courses had Indigenous perspectives. I had just sort of disengaged with that part of my life. And I can't, for me, it's really hard to separate that experience from this question. And so because of all of that, I sometimes still hesitate when I discuss these topics, because for me, they're still really new and I'm still exploring what all of this means to me. And so when I think about exclusion in terms of academic institutions, in terms of like library associations, things are still very much exclusionary, and we need to look at who we're inviting into our spaces. And I'm going to share a story. And so I have been at SFU for 7 years. Pardon the cat, he likes to speak. So I've been at SFU for 7 years, and before that I worked for 3 years as the assistant librarian under a library technician diploma at a First Nations library, the Stella Research and Resource Management Center. And I've always been very involved with BCLA. And so a few years ago, I was at a BCALS winter meeting. And during the business meeting, and I can't remember the exact context, but I was the only library technician in attendance, and I was challenged about why I was in this space. And I was directly asked by somebody what I would get out of being here. And I spoke up for library technicians, and I said, like, I staff Askaway, and I help our patrons on the research help desk, which at our institution liaison librarians don't do. I am, well, not anymore, but me and my colleagues were the people helping patrons in public service. There was also an email exchange between me and the former chair of the group about these issues, where I was very much brushed off and told that I didn't belong in these spaces. Following that, I was on the committee tasked to look at whether or not it should be the BC Academic Librarian section or the BC Academic Libraries section. And that took years. That little change took years. And I remember all of these events very clearly. And I remember sitting in the room at the Bellsburg branch of the SFU library and across from the person who I still have interactions with and who probably doesn't remember challenging me, but you can be sure that I remember. And I remember who was sitting next to me and the support that I got. And so I bring this up, and obviously it's still emotional because I was not reacting this way yesterday when I was thinking about this. But I bring this up because we talk a lot about the diversity needed in hiring practices and how can we reach a diverse undergraduates who want to go into librarianship. And I think some of these problems that we talk about are indicative of why it's not a welcoming profession. But we also need to think about our support staff, and there are no studies on support staff and the diversity that you might find in support staff. So I can only say, just anecdotally, I'm pretty sure our support staff are way more diverse than the librarian staff are. And I think it's a detriment to the profession that we don't engage with support staff at the same level as we do with the professional staff, the librarians. And I can't see anybody except my fellow panelists, so I can't see if I recognize any other library technicians. If you are there spiritually, I see you and I am here with you. And so I think we're missing part of it when we look at early career library workers and students, particularly when we talk about diversity in the larger context of an academic situation, academic institution, is who else is working in those spaces and why are they not brought into the conversation? And I remember that at that meeting, part of the conversation was, do we exclude library technicians but include other people working in libraries who happen to have a master's degree, regardless if they're doing library work? So I'm thinking like folks that work in like IT services, who are not on the floor helping patrons with their research questions. And so I challenged that, and then ended up having some microaggressions, lateral violence, I'm just now learning the terminology to name those, asked of me. And so we need to think about what barriers there are for our early career librarians and library technicians and library assistants, for those people looking to get into this profession. Are there ways, sorry, backtrack to think about some things. So are there ways for diverse groups of people to attain a library diploma? Do they have to leave community? Can they afford to attend those programs? Are they being welcomed, or are they being challenged in those spaces? Why would they stay in spaces if in cataloging classes they see things like everything is under Indians of North America and history starts when Columbus discovered the North America? Why would somebody stay? Not only as a patron of the library, but also in this profession. And so I think there's a lot of harmful practices within some of this work that really need to be addressed. And some of it starts with education, and some of it starts with just really looking at who is in the room and who is also doing this work of library and information service, and not at credentials.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm sorry that happened to you. I know that I specifically reached out to UFV and Lingera library tech programs because I know that a lot of BIPOC people are usually in those programs versus library school, which is not very diverse. Now on to Norda.